Hi, it's Chris with Entry Thingy. This is Art of the Call, where we're talking to artists, curators, and directors about the call for entries process. In this video, it's Chris Bennet with Newspace Center for Photography in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, we started in 2001 as a sort of a small artist space where photographers could come and work on photography, build a community, meet other photographers, exhibit their work, learn about photography, and we've just slowly grown into a nonprofit entity primarily focused on education and exhibiting work in the gallery. And now we offer digital services, well, not services, but digital facilities for photographers to use, as well as traditional black and white and alternative process. And now we also have a artist in residence program with a stipend where artists can come in for a month and have access to the facilities and be provided with a stipend to help support themselves. So really, in a nutshell, it would be we're focused on photographic education as well as supporting photographers in their work. When we did our first one in 2005, it was a really fun collaborative experience with bringing in a guest curator. Our first one, we worked with the curator of photography at the Portland Art Museum, so it's great that it gives us a chance to work with fairly well-known critics and curators in the art world to bring in a selection of artists from around the country and internationally to see really what is going on out there in the world. Our first exhibition, we called it Photography Now. It definitely gives just a great cross-section of what people are doing. And we've seen it change. We're in our 8th call for entry now, and so, you sort of see the trends change. So yeah, it's a great way to just see a lot of work and help promote photographers who are trying to sort of break into the gallery scene. And we've also seen a lot of people in our shows who have gone on to have more success at a higher level in commercial galleries and publications, publishing books. So it's nice to see that as well. Yeah. Oh, it seems to get harder and harder every year. We probably came into it with all these great ideas in mind, but now we're really we'll just have a brainstorming meeting with all the employees here in town, and try to do something current and interesting that's not too broad, but is also focused enough to give us an interesting show. One end of it is they do bring in it's a good source of revenue for us. So occasionally we'll have one of the local camera stores sponsor prizes, but yeah, beyond that, if we're paying the judge a stipend or any sort of fee, we can usually cover that with the entry fee that we have. But we do try to keep it affordable. There's a lot of, some of the calls out there get pretty expensive, and that would sort of go against. We're really trying to keep it affordable so people aren't afraid to enter. We'd rather get more entries and more work to choose from than less and make more money. But we are able to support through the entry fee all of the time spent. I mean, it is a lot of work going through all the entries and judging and putting the show together. But those fees are definitely covered. If the call for entry was free, then we would excuse me, definitely have to look into some type of sponsorship. Typically through our email list, physical mailing list, and then we use artshow.com, NYFA, it's the New York Foundation for the Arts.com. I believe there's a couple others out there, like artshow. Did I say artshow? Callforentry.com, artshow.com. So yeah, and we'll also make postcards and send postcards to colleges with art programs, put them in coffee shops, send them off to other photo centers around the country. So between physical and virtual, there's quite a few options there to help get the word out. With the, especially with the themed exhibitions, that will keep it fresh because it'll speak more to a specific style of photographer. With the annual open call that we do, you will see a lot of familiar names, but there's always people cycling in and out, most definitely. Not just with the calls for entry, but we have volunteers who help out at our front desk, answering phones, doing data entry, helping people set up people in the dark room or the digital lab. But yeah, we do get the volunteers on once it's time to start organizing paperwork for the calls for entries. We have volunteers who help out, but they get a nice reward and trade for facilities usage, and they get to sit on classes as well. So we try to compensate the volunteers as much as we can. Especially in the early days, there were a lot more technical questions. I think now that calls for entries are so prevalent, people are doing it more, so they're used to reading all the instructions. I mean, that's really the most important thing. Everything is always in the instructions of how to do things, but if someone doesn't quite understand how you do this many pixels or what DPI is, we'll get emails or phone calls, and it's usually pretty easy to handle. So, for the initial prospectus, there's really we try to put in bold, like, please follow instructions carefully. Once we select people for the exhibition, we send a contract and then a very large type, clearly laid out instruction page on what we need them to do as far as preparing the image size, framing, shipping, pricing, image info, print type. I think actually that's the question we get the most, is when we ask for print type in the entry, or when we're telling people what to submit. That's the biggest question we get, is what do you mean by print type? And by that we mean, is it a silver gelatin darkroom print? Is it an inkjet print? Is it a traditional chromogenic print? Is it a tintype, cyanotype, stuff like that? We want a file that's going to be large enough to view on the monitor, where it's not going to get noisy or pixelated. But we also don't want large, unmanageable file sizes. I mean, I think you guys have a file size limit for your uploads.
Well,
so so we try to, usually 1,000 pixels, 72 DPI is a really good size. That unless they're somehow processing their image wrong, it should look good when reviewing it. So yeah, we definitely want to make sure we get as close of a representation of what the final image will look like in the entry, so we're not disappointed when something arrives and it looks nothing like what we saw. Yeah, usually we'll go through and make sure everything is looking okay, and yeah, if something is not loaded right, or if it's just really pixelated or soft, we'll contact them and let them know. Well, we try not to select the same person twice. We also don't want to select anyone who has just juried another call for entry in the last, I'd say, 6 months to a year. So we're always trying to keep people fresh, keep new names in the mix. It's getting harder and harder with so many calls now. A lot of people are getting tapped to be judges. So yeah, just through our networks, people we know. Sometimes we'll reach out to people that we don't know, but we do like to select people that we trust what they do. We like what they do as far as curating or selecting images. So, but you also want to select people that will have a draw, that people want to get their work in front of them. I think that's also another important aspect of the whole juried exhibition is being a photographer, and when I submit my work to calls, it's usually because I want to get my work in front of that person as well. So yeah, that's pretty important. Really, we just tell them the amount of wall space we have. Unless it's a themed exhibition, then we'll talk with them about the idea behind the theme, sort of what we're thinking. But for the open calls, we just say we can fit 35 20 by 24s in our gallery. Have at it. You can pick one image from 35 people. You can pick 2 images from 16, 17 people, or you could do maybe 3 or 4 from just a handful of people. So really, we kind of leave it up to them and their whole process going through the work. And we've had, in the 8 years we've done it, we've had just about every one of those scenarios happen, where we've had a work of just singles, a work of 2 from each artist, and then one judge who selected, I think, 5 images from 5 people to make it a little more cohesive and tight. So it's really up to the judge. As far as being open to whoever wants to submit can submit. So it's great to have emerging photographers next to someone who might be a little more well-known on a national or international level. But we actually try not to look at names when we're judging. We really want to judge based on imagery. So I guess that's sort of another thing we do tell the judges is, it is up to them ultimately what they want to do, but really judge based on the imagery. Don't look at the names first. Yeah, for the juried exhibition, we do $500 cash prize and a solo exhibition for the top person selected. So actually, ironically, this show is a solo exhibition from last year's juried exhibition winner. Some have made the selection through the images they see on the website or through Entry Thingy, and some are able to come and make their selection in person when they see the work exhibited. We've had, we don't do it every time, but we've had a little jar where people we do this sort of the, I don't know, what do we call it? The People's Choice Award. So at the end of the month, we'll go through and tally who got the most votes and present them with some type of an award from a sponsor, like local camera shop or cash prize. So yeah, that was actually pretty fun. Getting into the virtual world, the Facebook world, I guess we'd rather just keep it physical. Come in here, look at the show, and then you can make a choice. Experiencing the work in person, physically, is usually quite a bit different than seeing it on a screen, especially on a Facebook page where it's small, it's out of context. We feel that people will have perhaps a different reaction once they come into a gallery space and experience it. So for the juried exhibitions, the artist is responsible for shipping both ways. Unfortunately, we would lose a lot of money if we had to pay for everyone's shipping. It gets pretty expensive. So we're not able to cover any of those costs, but we do all the install and unpack and then save the materials and then repack it when we're done and ship it back to them and the materials it arrived in. But and it's fun. Usually they're the most challenging shows to hang because it all comes to us and it's sort of thrown on our plate to come up with a good sequence, something that has a nice flow to it with so much work that can also be so different across the board. That's something we do when we get all the work unpacked. We'll generally set everything out around the gallery space, and we'll take different approaches. Sometimes, we don't want something really tiny next to a really giant piece, and there are certain walls where bigger pieces look better and just work better in the space than smaller pieces. So we do have to take our physical wall space into consideration first with placement. Secondly, we also want a nice flow with the actual images themselves. So we have to take the physical size, the framing, as well as the image, color, black and white, alt process. So that's also where it gets complicated, is piecing together a puzzle that looks good. And it's challenging for us, and it's a good challenge. It keeps our brains working. Between taking a show down and getting a show up, it's at least 3 or 4 days. Yeah, especially with the juried exhibitions, because there's a lot of unpacking. Each piece hangs differently. So a show like this, where all the frames are the same size, the hanging hardware is exactly the same, everything is the nails are all going to go at the same height. When you get work that's framed and mounted and matted differently, sometimes you're using screws, sometimes you're using Velcro, nails, so it poses a challenge there. That's more, it's a celebration for the artists to bring their family and friends and show their accomplishment on the wall and socialize, rub elbows, have some beer, some wine, some snacks. Yeah, it's sort of the celebration for all the hard work that the artist has done, from shooting the image to printing it, framing it, getting it all ready. So personally, if I'm going to an opening, I don't expect to really take in the work all that much, because there's so many people, there's music, there's a lot of noise. It's hard to navigate the space. Those are typically more for celebrating and socializing and trying to take the work in as well. When I really want to go see a show, I go on a weekday during the day when I know the gallery will be quiet and nice and empty, so I can go at my own pace and not be interrupted and chit-chatty. I can just really take in the work. A show can be successful because it's printed and framed beautifully, hung really well, looks great in the space and looks great on the walls. That makes it successful. But then you also have the other level of a response from the viewer. So with any show, you're going to have people who come in and aren't going to respond to the work in a visceral manner. So for me, the way the work is presented does affect the overall interpretation of the artwork for me. But I might walk into a show and think, well, this work doesn't interest me at all, but it's beautifully done. It's really well done. Or conversely, I could walk in and love the work, but just be like, wow, they really did not put any thought or effort into the printing or framing or hanging of this show. So bringing all that together is definitely, it's very important, and it can definitely make or break a show or how an artist's work is interpreted.